We are live and we are going to start to talk about, part two. Okay. We'll see if there needs to be three parts. I'm just running through my notes. Well, we're dealing with relationship conflict. So, the biggest reason why relationships end that could have continued, that had all the ingredients of a good relationship, that the desire was there and everything was there in the beginning, but it ends up ending or you know just being over with, is due to conflict and how that couple handles conflict. And so, for free on my channel, I'm going to give you all of the secrets and tools to handle relationship conflict in this three-part series. I'm doing that, of course, because although the all the tools will be here, it's not the knowledge of the tools that's going to be the most important. It's going to be how you execute them and whether or not your partner can be a good partner to you in executing these strategies and principles, and also executing these herself, right? Um, so that's the thing. It's not an easy thing to do. Now we're going to talk and refer back to what's called the golden ratio. So I say or magic ratio, not golden ratio. Okay. The magic ratio, according to the Gottman Institute, is a 5 to 1, meaning 5 positive interactions to 1 negative interaction. So and I talked about in the last video that model. Okay. Now, of course, there's some flaws in that ratio, in that we're not accounting for the intensity of the negative versus the intensity of the positive to counteract that negative, right? So if you're like, oh, hey, I banged your sister, but I bought you these flowers, cooked a dinner. You look pretty today. And, I sent that email you wanted me to send. And, whatever, pick a number 5 thing, and I'm sorry for banging your sister, apology or something, right? Those 5 positives aren't necessarily going to counteract the fact that you just banged your sister. You see what I'm saying? So there's an intensity thing that we need to consider. But what the model does illustrate is that when you have a negative impact or interaction in your relationship, it has more gravity than the positive. So if I have a negative interaction, right, it's going to take away from my relationship more than a positive interaction is going to add to. Okay. The reason is because as human beings, we are risk averse rather than goal centered or happiness and success motivated. All right. That's our instincts. What kept us alive is being risk averse. What kills us is being success motivated without any mitigation for risk, right? So if I'm going big or go home on that big hunt or big battle in evolutionary times, and I'm putting myself more at risk of not surviving, aren't I? And so this is why, even in your own goals in your own life, you're more motivated to stick with the and on a neurological level, you're more motivated to stick with where you're at, status quo, and what's comfortable, and to avoid pain rather than to pursue something that is better for you or brings your life and standards to a higher level, right? And so, like in my mindset course, a lot of stuff for helping you with your goals is designed to essentially trick your neurological system, okay, into making your where you're at a painful enough place to be for you to go someplace better. But then, of course, it's managing that pain. It's not, creating toxic pain where it cripples you and it makes everything unpleasant either. So, it's being able to achieve things in a peaceful mind state, knowing with confidence of your success, but having your intrinsic reward be towards the actions for achieving things rather than being rewarded for avoiding the activities that you would need to do to be successful. So, in any sense, Point is with conflict though, and with relationship dynamics, is that we're going to avoid that pain and avoid that negative, because the negative is just more impacting. And when something negative happens to us in a relationship or in any part of our lives, it's going to have a greater emotional impact than the positive thing. So now the intensity again does matter, but assuming equal intensity, it's going to take you 5 roughly positive, experiences with your partner to interact a negative one. Arguably, if you are if you're at 5 to 1 or better, okay, your partner's going to have good emotions towards you and want to stick with you and want to work things out when problems happen. If you throw that ratio off, and let's say you're 2 or 3 negatives to 3 or 4 positives, then her feelings of your value is going to get less and less, and this is where devaluing occurs. Now, in the case of personality disorders, women and men will devalue their partners, and they'll do so almost as part of that condition of that disorder. And sometimes people will do it intentionally, but unintentional devaluation can occur in normal, healthy people. And this is what happens when conflict arises and you don't handle it properly and you throw this magic ratio off. But of course, how do you address a problem and keep the magic ratio? And that's, the answer is simple, but the how-to part is complicated. And then do you have the ingredients to do it? Right. And so that's where a couple of things, I need to promote here so you have more resources. One is my year-long mastermind group. I can give you all the information. I'm not giving you necessarily all of the information behind that I have behind a paywall. There's a lot more behind a paywall. But in terms of handling conflict, I'm going to hand you all the information here. But you just won't be able to execute it properly, because what it takes to handle conflict properly is a emotional calibration and emotional mastery and self-awareness. And that's going to take some time to work out, right? If you could immediately have all the self-awareness and emotional mastery and emotional calibration, you wouldn't have any problems. I could just tell you the how-to, and you wouldn't need a year-long program with me. But we're constantly improving our awareness of ourselves and having mastery over our emotions and our mind, and being able to be calibrated to a situation. That is what success or failure depends on, and not just in your relationships, but in other areas of your life. And so that's why I have this year-long program. The link is in the description. The first consult is free in order to see if you're a good fit for it. So that's one thing as you're going through this. Another thing is I'm going to have the Alpha Mindset Summit will drop and be scheduled for December. This is going to help get you guys ready for the new year and get your goals ready and your relationships lined up and everything else. And this is focused strictly on your inner game. Okay. And so it's going to involve updates to the Alpha Mindset course and some Zoom calls with me. So stay tuned for that. For free, okay, if you're not on my newsletter email list, get on it. I give out the how to cheat proof your relationships, how to set your frame in your relationship so that you and her aren't susceptible to cheating. All right. We need to stop demonizing cheating. Well, people who cheat, we can demonize cheating, of course, but not people who cheat, because cheating is a part of the human condition. That's why it's such a high percentage rate that it happens. We can demonize the behavior, but not necessarily the person. All right. Demonizing yourself for having done it in the past, demonizing women for having it done to you, or men. And for my female listeners, the other side of it doesn't actually solve anything. All right. It doesn't allow you to be aware of where your part was in that relationship when they made that decision. All right. And which is critically important to prevent it from happening again for you. Right. And so we need to bag all of that self-protection and ego protection and judgment and learn about it and learn how to solve the problem in our relationships, I give that away for free on my email list. All right. So you just need to click that link and do it. Of course, subscribe to the channel. I am definitely shadow banned. So I rely on your grassroots support and help in order to get this valuable information out to people so they can fix their stuff. And another caveat here before we continue, two of them actually. One is if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Okay. Throw them in the chat. But in order to ensure that I see them and they're answered, do a super chat of some sort so that I can know about it. Otherwise, I'm going to be stuck on my notes and I might miss your question. Sometimes I spot a good one and it's not a super and I'll address it, but there's no promises otherwise. And then there was another thing I was going to say, but I can't remember what it was. Oh, yeah. What was it? Nope. What was it? Yeah, well, whatever. So that's it. And let's get into now more stuff. So you're gonna have actionable stuff here, guys, that's gonna help you with conflict management. And oh, that was my other thing, is I'm gonna speak a little bit more gender neutrally here than normal. Even though most of my audience is men, this information does most of it does apply to both men and women. Okay, so I'll be using terms like partners instead of girlfriends or something. You know what I mean? Usually I'm talking to the dudes, but this one I'm kind of talking to everybody. All right, so just keep that in mind here. The information is just too valuable and it's useful for everybody. All right. Okay, so we went over the goals and some instinctual stuff. Hi guys. What the hell? So how long was that? I don't know. It's 14:34. That's awesome. So maybe that's the other reason why algorithms don't like me. Can't work my fucking computer. Well, how about now? Is my screen shouldn't be black anymore. So there we go. Okay, cool. So you guys should be back there. I just had a technical problem there, so it looks like we're back in action. I guess I'll just continue. Hopefully that won't be. I don't know what that's going to do for people who are watching it. So I might have to just um, download and repost all of these in a playlist, like after the fact. You know what I mean? Because now you have this big gap of like 4 minutes of me going off air. So that's not really cool. But I'm not going to change it. I'm going to keep it. So hopefully, guys will see it. You know what I mean? All right. Well, you know what? And part of my mindset too, I mean, on one hand, it's like I want to get this information out. I want people to have access. But you know what? This channel isn't for stupid people. It's just not. And so, like, I need people to be smarter and that be willing to put effort into their own lives and be wanting to actually fix their shit and to, work around some of the bullshit. You know what I mean? Like, it's a lot of you guys do that. A lot of you guys have been, you're like, crap, my YouTube is unsubscribed me to this channel like a couple times now. So I just make sure I check in to see when, the live stuff's happening so I can work on stuff, or I'm going to get behind a paywall so I can have access and send me messages, ask questions, and get my stuff handled directly, right? Or, get in one of the groups or courses or something. Like, people are motivated to fix their stuff, fix them. The rest of everybody else, I mean, yeah, it sucks. I got about a four minute gap right now that I don't know how to fix on a live stream, but and it may affect the rest of the audience. Now I'm basically going to do an hour with half of an audience now because it won't pick up, everybody. But whatever, like, if you don't give a fuck about fixing your shit, then go fuck yourself, like, sorry. Like, everyone, you don't come crying to me in a year when your girlfriend doesn't like you, or you get broken up with, or whatever, and you ruin your shit, or you lose your crap and you're on some girl, and now you are running around apologizing and coming to me figuring out how to fix your fucking problem. If you're not willing to, like, work through a technical difficulty for 4 minutes and then watch the rest of the show. So, like, part of me is like, oh no, like, I'm really mad that happened. But the other part of me is like, fuck you. You know what I mean? If you can't handle it and get through it, do you know what I mean? Say, if you're not smart enough to, like, help yourself, then I guess it is what it is. I'm not here. I could be very entertaining, but I'm not here, like, as an entertainment channel necessarily. I'm here to help you out. So if you can't help yourself, it is what it is, right? But anyways, I will end up reposting all of these parts though in a non-live format now that happens, so I can try to make it as digestible for the user as possible. If you notice in my last one too, I did chapters, so like you can highlight the parts that apply to you the best and what rewatch and stuff like that. So I'm going to do my best to help you guys out, but I need you guys to help me too, and help yourself rather, not even that. So at any rate, we'll get into, what are we? All right. So emotional mastery, self-awareness, that's what's critically important. You won't be able to execute this stuff without it. All right. And so rewatch part one. Yes, it's long. Okay. But it gets into some of the aspects of that and some of the, drives, emotional and mental, for men in general. Okay. That are, backed by evolutionary psychology and modern psychology. So that's going to give you a background. You have to learn a lot of this, especially for you guys, but women, you need to do this too the other way, is to have empathy for your partner. You're trying to understand how women are in general, and then you deduce it down to your individual woman you're dealing with. Okay. And women would do themselves a huge favor if they did the same thing. If you understand, like, why dudes are the way they are, or why women are the way they are in general when it comes to mating, you're going to have a much clearer picture for why your girlfriend or wife or whoever does the things that she does. And so we start there, but don't end there though either. General concepts of evolutionary psychology, you know, can leave you with a nihilistic viewpoint of the mating marketplace, and that's not going to be productive for you, because each person has individual motivations based on their own background, their own personal genetic makeup and psychological triggers, both unconscious and ones that they're aware of. So that's what makes people unique, and you need to consider that. And you're looking to have empathy for your partner, which means an understanding of their perspective. And in order to have an understanding for someone else's perspective, you got to bag your ego and bag your own emotional junk that you have going on in your mind in order to be open and understanding of someone else in a radically accepting way. In other words, you're using radical acceptance. Okay. You are not looking to judge them for their behavior or for their mindset or thoughts, at least not right away. Not that you would judge. It's not about judging them, but I mean, you will judge their behavior, and you will make assessment whether something is good or bad and all those things. But you need to be able to listen first and understand their motivations without inserting your moral judgments or your personal insecurities or concerns or anxieties into what she's saying. All right. So that's what takes that emotional self control for both men and women. And that's a really hard thing to do. Right. But it's something that is doable. And that's where you have to work on yourselves a little bit every day. Okay. I see that, super. I will get to in a second. All right. I want to get through this. Now, here's the thing: timing is everything. All right. A lot of times, and I've been this way before, something happens where you perceive, that this is something that's a conflict. It's something that is a boundary cross or a condition cross, or maybe the threat of a boundary cross or a condition, not meeting up a condition, right? Maybe she says something that really confuses you and makes you think, gosh, is that how where her morals and her values are? Like, is that how she thinks about, you know, casual sex, or is that how she thinks about commitment or whatever? Like, is this person going to be good for me? And I'm, emotionally invested. And now they're saying these things that make me question her mindset and her ability to be in this relationship, right? Like, this is all things that might go on in your head, and you want to bring something up that may then lead to conflict, right? All right. So if that's the case, you need to consider a few things. One, you need to consider the timing of it. All right. And this is a big thing people don't think about, and timing is everything. So when dealing with a conflict, timing is so important. And a lot of people just have bad timing when they decide to bring an issue up, and it creates a massive conflict that didn't even need to be a conflict to begin with. So something happens, what we could call a friction point, right? And that friction happens. And then let's say you're like thinking, well, I have to bring this up right away, right now. And where does that come from? Right? That comes from, again, a lack of emotional self control and calibration, because your emotions are a certain way now because of something she said or did. And so you need to bring it up. You feel like you need to bring it up right away because you want to calm your own emotions down, right? And that's what ends up happening. And that's not the right answer, because let's say, for example, you're in a public situation and she does something that's small, and your inclination, it throws your emotional balance off, right? Your inclination might be to make a scene in public, let's say. Now, sometimes because it's a boundary cross, you may have to do that. And that's not on that's not a fault of yours. That's something that has to be done. But a lot of times it's not the case. And you end up exaggerating a conflict by looking like you're overreacting, or looking like you're just, being embarrassing or whatever. And then instead of the focus being on that other person's behavior that was out of bounds, the focus becomes on how you handled it now, because you didn't time this properly, right? And why didn't you time it properly? Because you lacked emotional self-control and awareness, right? And so this is why that mindset stuff is so important. All right. Your inner game will dictate how successful you are in your outer game. But so you want preventative. You want to pick a time where the moods are good. So let's say there's a problem or a friction point. So you have three things you want you in terms of timing. You want to look at, is this something preventative? So we're going to prevent something off in the future. Is this something I need to address immediately, right now, the second, because boundary was crossed and I have to, or there's a threat, or there's like some major thing going on where I need to right now immediately, address this problem? Or is this something that happened already? It's not preventative, but I don't need to address it right this second, so I can be well timed and when and how I address it. So those are the three things: preventative, immediate, and well timed. So preventative, all right, there's certain things which are not necessarily conflicts at the moment. There's not a current fight going on, but you need to do something or say something so that you prevent a future conflict. Now, both you and your partner are responsible for doing this. Okay. So this is not something that you put on the other person. This is not where you get to do a bunch of stuff that throws your partner off of their emotional center. And then you say, well, that's their problem for being thrown off on their emotional center. Not if you're not doing, what everything that you could reasonably do in order to prevent that. And so, in other words, it's when you're with somebody, whether it's casual or more than that, even, you guys need to be giving a crap about each other's emotions. If you don't, then you probably don't need to be together, right? So you need to care and have empathy and sympathy as well. All right. Sympathy is where you care about the emotions and you identify with them a bit, versus empathy is just trying to understand them from their perspective. Okay. You need to have both for the other person to a degree. Now, you're not responsible for your partner's emotions. Okay. Only the individual can be responsible for their own emotions. However, you are responsible for your own behavior and what you do in that relationship that could affect those emotions. And you want to be a complement to your partner in having a good, positive emotional state, not a detriment to your partner. So that's where the responsibility is on you. You're not responsible for her or his emotions, but you are responsible for being a complement to he or she having a positive emotional state, right? Versus being a detriment to that, or worse, pushing her into a negative emotional state. And this is why the preventative stuff is so important. And if you want to maintain frame as a man, this is really important too. So a simple thing might be preventative, saying like, let's say you guys have plans and it's a hard time, but you got to run like an errand or two before then. And you know that if you just like leave or don't come home from work right away, start running errands without any communication, she's going to get emotionally off centered, wondering if you're going to be on time for whatever event you have to go to. Okay. So a simple, hey, after work, I got to run here and there and pick up a couple things, but I'll be home on time and we'll be ready by 6. Sending a simple communication that says, hey, you know, I'm doing this to let you know, so don't worry. That goes a really long way. Okay. Um, Another example is like, simple things like dealing with boundaries. Okay. So it's like, let's say, an ex boyfriend or girlfriend runs into you and they try to strike up a conversation. They run into you in public somewhere or whatever. You know what I mean? Let's say it's a local bar, tavern, restaurant where you guys know mutual people, right? Um, a preventative thing would be to say right away, hey, I ran into so and so X, and this is what happened, and freely talk about it, right? A not doing that might mean the other partner might find out, right? That this interaction happened, and then they're going to feel like you were hiding something from them. Now, you weren't doing anything wrong by not mentioning it necessarily. You may not have been hiding something from them. In fact, maybe you were trying to avoid creating distress in your partner by not mentioning it. Or really, usually, though, it's not even about that because most people are selfish. You're just avoiding creating distress in yourself by having to mention that and having them feel distressed. And then, you have to now deal with that, right? And so, so you don't mention it, but then what happens? She or he finds out your part, and then now where you're at. Now they're wondering if you hid this from them. You see what I mean? And so you have to be proactive, and it's a difficult thing, especially if you're a busy person. Do you know what I mean? And you're on your own mental point of origin and this and that, but you have to have consideration for your partner, and you have to see these pain points for your partner ahead of time. And it is up to you in order to take preventative measures to mitigate conflicts. Do you know what I mean? Saying certain key things, like if a pain point of, it could be any like little thing, like, right. Let's say if you're usually late and forgetful. Do you know what I mean? Saying ahead of time, like I said, where I know we got that thing tonight, and here's what I'm doing. I'll be home by this time, and we'll leave doing that, for example, would mitigate her stress level, right? And so then it's not like, an hour before some event, you're now getting, so are you coming or what? Are you right? Getting an attitude and getting this negative. Right now, it's up to her or, him, if it's him the case, but it's up to, the person that's distressed to try to deal with their own emotions. But you as her partner need to help her with that. Okay. And as a man, you're the leader in the relationship. So you need to lead the emotions in the proper place. Now, this doesn't mean that by missing a preventative measure, you're inconsiderate, you're a piece of crap, and you're making mistakes. And that she gets to sit there and blame you for her emotional state. That's not okay. And so, see, this is where both partners here, and this is why I'm speaking to men and women here, because both people have to do their part in the interaction, right, in order to have a healthy conflict mitigation and management. And so, like, you are not going to remember to do the preventative thing all the time. You want to put the effort in to do the preventative thing, and it will help you in the long run. Okay. But you're not always going to be perfect. And it's really important that the other person is not punishing you, okay, for not being preventative, especially if nothing actually happened in terms of a condition not being met or a boundary crossed, right? To argue or to be emotionally distressed and then take it out on your partner when no actual offense happened, you're just mad because they didn't, do something preventative, that or whatever, communicate better. You're now the person creating conflict. And so each person has to be aware and not wanting to create problems where there aren't problems, right? But but the preventative thing is going to prevent a lot of problems for you, because remember the golden ratio. So if you're having consistent places where she is in emotional distress and thinking bad things about you because you're not doing the preventative measures, what are you doing? You're tallying up these negative interactions, which takes a series of positive interactions to then counteract it. And it's just like, taking what, filling up a bathtub full of water and the drain, not draining it fast enough. And eventually that bathtub overflows and the relationship blows up and she breaks up with you. You know what I mean? Or you end up breaking up with her or whatever. And so that's something you don't want to have happen because of an accumulation of negative events. A biggest way, one of the most effective way of stopping that communication is doing these preventative things so that conflict doesn't occur. Setting boundaries early on, early frame announcements or early frame things like, hey, you know, for example, hey, if anybody an ex or anyone we've ever had sex with drops in our DMs, we need to make sure we share that with each other and not have secret conversations, right? You say that before it happens so that you're not finding out about some conversation she's having with an ex boyfriend and wondering if she's really invested in you and getting upset and pissed off and her going, well, I didn't do anything wrong. You see what I'm saying? Um, a good preventative one is the level of commitment you're in. So some of you guys are just dating and there's kind of an unsaid thing in the beginning that you're dating. But if she's going to have an expectation that you're with her exclusively, and if you're presenting to her that you're with her exclusively without having that conversation and you're dating two other women, well, you're going to have this common problem I see all the time for the guys spinning the plates is they really like the girl and they get 6 months, a year into it with her, and they're thinking about a commitment, but she finds out that he had been banging other women for the first 3, 4, 5 months of the relationship, and there was never any communication about that. Now there's a conflict, right? A conflict that maybe could have been prevented, right? And so there's all of these things that you got to think ahead and think about conflicts, and you want to recognize your partner's emotional trigger points, things that are going to bother that person, things that make them anxious, things that are going to create a friction in your relationship, things that bother you that your other person could do or stimulate without even knowing it. And you want to find those opportunities with the right time and place to illustrate those boundaries, illustrate those conditions, and to communicate so that we prevent future conflict. So some of the best way of not throwing the magic ratio off is preventing conflict from occurring. All right. So we got that understood. Now let's look at some supers. Thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate it. You're the man, and you're killing it. All right. So look at Castro. You're super. Thanks again for the supers, guys. Okay. Found a shirt from a guy my LTR met studying abroad in laundry. Oh, in the laundry. I explained it's not appropriate to hold on to a relationship. She said she met the guy 6 years ago for one night and didn't bang. Okay. Yeah. So that's, I'm not sure if that's a comment or a question. We can see the next one here. So she said she has no emotional attachment to it. She complied, but threw a fit and cried about it, and has military uniform given to her from the same guy. Should I assume that I'm not her best and discard my commitment? Yeah, I would assume that she has an emotional attachment to that guy still. All right. And so that's would be my assumption. If she is hanging on to mementos and photos and BS from some guy, then I would assume that I'm not her best. And I would assume that she is hanging on to that for a reason. And so, and then, women like to try to create, and I know this is kind of a universal show for both men and women. So, but you're going to have to, women listening are going to have to deal with it when I talk about female nature and you're uncomfortable about it, it's whatever. But a lot of women like to, keep their options open, right? But if she's with somebody that is her apex alpha, she's a lot less interested in that. I'm not saying it completely eradicates, their desire for that. That's going to depend on her background. I mean, if she's been through a lot of guys and a lot of relationships, then she's practiced a process of discarding men and being discarded by men. So there's going to be more of a tendency to want to keep backup plans, even if you're the alpha guy, right? But it sounds like, based on what you wrote, and that's all I know about it, it sounds like there's still an emotional attachment to that guy, and it's not going to be for friends, for frenzies. Do you know what I'm saying? Now she says she never slept with a guy, and it was only one night she hung out with him. But that seems that can't be true. If he's sending her all, there's a lot of emotional communication that happened between the two, and it sounds like she's not being transparent or honest about that. All right. I don't know what she's presenting. Is she presenting he's just a friend? Well, this seems to be like it's not the case. It seems like that she is having relationship emotions for this other guy, or at least that was there, and that's something she wants to hang on to. Now, maybe it was just a fantasy relationship where they were mostly online and in DMs, and they only met the one time and didn't sleep together. I mean, I don't know. Okay, that can happen, but I doubt it. You know, if I have to be a betting man, I'm assuming they saw each other at least more than once and probably slept together. But I don't want to put that in your head and be wrong either, right? And so, are we going to look at statistics or your individual situation? And so, if we're looking at your individual situations, I can't tell you for sure. I know that a lot of times women will say, "Yeah, you know, like he doesn't mean anything. It's just we just had a thing and we were talking." She'll say things like, "We were talking," or "we were dating," or whatever, but really they were just banging. You know what I mean? It's like, and it's a lot more than what they say, and they diminish what it is because that's, you know, a form of dishonesty or whatever. But a lot of them don't even realize or, you know, think that they're doing it. They're trying to diminish that for you because you're the available option, but maybe they're clinging on to ideas that they're not willing to let go. And the reality is, if she's not willing to let go of those ideas, then she probably doesn't deserve your commitment. All right. So I'm not saying go run out and dump her, but you guys need to have open communication about this. And lucky for you, this is a friction point, and I'm doing this series right now so you can use the techniques that you're going to learn from this video, and if I probably another one too that I'll have to do, and 3-part series I'm guessing, and you can use what you know here and try to solve this problem. But at the end of the day, if she is not free and enthusiastic about getting rid of things from an ex, to include pictures on her social media, little mementos, and I'm not talking about like, you know, every single gift she's ever had for a part, you know, something that's a useful gift. Like, you know, hey, this, you know, I bought this kitchen knife set. You know, he bought me this kitchen knife set, and it's her not kitchen knife set in her kitchen, and she uses it. I don't think she necessarily needs to throw the kitchen knife set out, right? But if it's like cards and Valentine's cards and I love you mementos and little pieces of jewelry, you know, and stuff that, you know, she's going to wear all the time, or things that are more of a sentimental nature, she should be willing to get rid of that stuff and actually want to. And that's another thing. It's like when a woman sees you as her best, there's a small level to maybe even a large level of embarrassment for her past sexual encounters and relationships. The reason why is because if her standard is you and you're the best, then everybody else that she's ever slept with is below that. You know what I mean? Everybody else that she's ever been into a thing with is below that. And so she is kind of embarrassed about those things. She doesn't really want to keep them around. You know what I mean? She wants to be proud of the relationship she's in, and she doesn't want to keep those other things around if she sees you as her best option. Now, there's some other caveats here, though. Sometimes women want to have power in the relationship, and they do it in toxic and unhealthy ways. This is where she will say or do things that will make you question your sexual power with her. She'll keep things around like that in order to get a rise out of you. You know what I mean? To strike into that jealous nature, and see, you know, so she can know that she has that control over you. So you need to assess if that's possibly a thing, right? So that's one thing that people will do. The other thing, again, in this case, what it could be if it's not straight up, she was banging this guy and he's a past relationship guy that got away, and he was the alpha and you're not, okay, in her chimp brain. What it could be, right, is that she had an emotional relationship with this guy that never was actually sexual. In which case, you have to decide if you want to discard the relationship or not. Um, sexual the sexual exchange for a man when a woman has the sexual exchange with somebody else is much greater risk to your relationship than the emotional one. Not that the emotional one isn't a risk, okay, but the sexual exchange is a much greater risk. It's the other way around for males. All right. For males, the emotional exchange is a greater risk to his relationship than the sexual one. And it's just how we're wired. It has to do with evolutionary psychology. And a lot of you know this, some of you newbies won't, but it's that guys are wired to spread seed and can have less emotional connection and needs of caretaking for their partners. Whereas a woman is designed to take the seed of only the best options. And that's who she will have the most emotional draw to. But sometimes women will have emotional things going on, which helps, protect her mentally from investing in her relationship that she's in. Again, it's a power thing, right? And so, she may feel there's possibilities that the guy that she's with, makes her feel powerless because of him being higher SMV and whatever. And so she keeps these little side things going on with friend zone guys and weaker guys and stuff because she wants to know that she has, that she wants to boost her self-esteem so she can, show up for that guy that she's sees as her alpha. I mean, there's all human psychology is very complex. So I'm just throwing past things out there that it could be, and this is why general internet answers are not always going to be right because even if they're right, they're not universally correct. However, from what I can see in your circumstance here, crying about getting rid of stuff, having a fit, keeping the guy's military uniform, keeping the guy's shirts, that is a sign that is a telltale sign that she had a lot more going on with this guy than she's letting off and that she's not telling you the truth. And so it's the burden of proof is on her to demonstrate otherwise. Okay. Now, preventatively, because we're talking about preventative stuff, at this point in my talks, is like this could have been an early frame thing, right? Like saying in those quiet conversations, and this is where quiet conversations are important, but saying something like, in the beginning of dating, yeah, I wouldn't be in a relationship with someone who keeps an ex around or an old flame around, Well, and she might be like, yeah, well, of course. Well, what do you mean? Well, keeping banter going on with text or DMs or keeping, you know, photos on our social media that are couples photos with each other and, having this, keeping mementos like Christmas cards or Valentine's Day cards, things like that. Like, a scrapbook of each other. It's just weird things. If a girl's keeping that stuff around intentionally, I wouldn't be in a long-term relationship with her. I mean, she would have to, that tells me that she just has hangups on, having that conversation before the commitment is a preventative measure because now you have a friction point and you're in an LTR, a long-term relationship that could have been completely avoided. Maybe you don't now. She could have just, she could have hit it better from you. I mean, that's the other part of it, but yeah, so it's just not a good thing. But I mean, I'm giving you advice based on some basic. All right, so I'm going to go back to comments here. I saw the next message. So the question is, so you're asking, do I go back to spinning plates? She was one of my plates in the beginning and now we're in a commitment. I think that what you need to do is not just do things without full awareness, okay, of what's going on with her in the situation. All right. So you need to have a discussion and you need to use the techniques I'm going to give you here in this talk and have a hard discussion with her. All right. And find out where she's at, because is this somebody that, you know, but this is definitely someone that she lied about. It's like if it were me, I would go back to dating and I would tell her that we're not in a commitment at this point. You're free to date and I'm going to date. And we can still see each other and see how it goes. But right now, I don't give my commitment away to somebody who's hanging on to another man, in a relationship. And I don't, and this is not, your actions are not matching what you've told me so far about this relationship. So it's up to you whether you want to clear this up or not and have a commitment with me. I'll still see you, but I'm not going to, we're just going to go back to seeing each other casually and then see what happens. I'm not saying there isn't a commitment in our future, but I need to know. And you seem to have a lot of things to sort out emotionally and mentally before you can be in a relationship. And, and I think we'll just revisit it when you're ready. And I would just like handle it like that, me personally. If I had found everything you're saying and ran into that behavior, I would want to have a discussion with her and I would say that's what it is. What I wouldn't do is just start fucking other women without saying anything to her. Unless, of course, you don't care about her and don't ever expect it to work out with her. But even then, like I wouldn't do that. That's a very selfish, thing to do. And, it's just not selfish isn't even the right word. It's not, you're not being morally congruent with yourself here because if you expect her to maintain a commitment once a verbal commitment's happened and then you just start banging other girls, without telling her that she broke the conditions of your commitment and having that conversation, then that's kind of dubious right on your part. So this is where guys like make massive mistakes and in my opinion, you know what I mean? And then it's just like she's not going to make this connection that you're banging other girls because of this incident. You're going to be the bad guy, right? And it's not going to work. And this is why you always want to look, into that other person's perspective. Now, if you don't care, just break up. Like if it's not something that you care about, then just break up, right? But obviously, you care. You wouldn't be asking me. So again, I would break this if I were you. I would say this is a condition of the commitment, and you have hangups and things that you need to work out before your relationship ready. I'm still gonna see you. We can just go forward as if we're seeing each other, but we're not boyfriend girlfriend right now. We're dating. All right. You need to understand that because I'm not going to have somebody I'm building a life with who's holding on to other guys, and then she's not going to like that. She might, break contact for a couple weeks. Hell, she might not ever see you again after that. And by the way, if she doesn't, and this is good, right? If she decides to not see you again and says, well, screw it, he broke up with me, and then she goes and bangs another guy and does all this other stuff, you see, that will tell you that she doesn't see you as her best. She was with you because you were the good for now guy, and she's hanging on to other ideas and other things. That will tell you her behavior. If she's devastated about what happens and wants to, make some kind of amends, she's not going to be out banging a bunch of other dudes. She's going to focus on you and focus on wanting to demonstrate that you're the guy, right? And quite frankly, like we accept too much bad behavior from especially guys and accepting bad behavior from women. But of course, I'm sure it's the other way around. I just don't counsel as many women. All right. But it's like we're so quick to accept this bad behavior. I mean, she had some sort of thing going on. She's keeping little mementos and she thinks that's okay. Like, think about how stupid that is, right? Like, that's just stupid. And she wants you to accept it. Like, to me, that's like a common sense thing, right? But whatever, I wouldn't just like discard her completely unless unless there's other factors that I don't know about here. If you really care about her, you want to see if it can work. You don't necessarily need to discard her, but you know, it's really just, hey, you know what I mean? Don't give your commitment away to this. You let her know and then see what she does. And if she values you enough, you're not saying I'm not going to see you anymore, that no commitments ever in our future. You're just saying that this is a massive boundary cross and I won't continue in a relationship with you if that's what we're doing, and you're not married with kids and all this and living together. So I mean, hopefully not anyway. So where that's makes that more complicated. And so really, she will demonstrate with her behavior on how she tries to remedy this, whether or not you're the best dude for her or not. Okay. Give her the opportunity to do that. And if she doesn't, then you'll know. If she does, then you'll know. Okay. Great question though. All right. That's great. Um, so yeah, I've had a lot of success coaching women, coaching fat women. Um, I, I've had women. Now, you know what I would do if they need a fitness trainer? I'm not going to be their fitness trainer. I have online female fitness trainers I would refer them to, though. A couple that are very, very good who used to be heavier and are smoking hot now. We're talking these chicks are in their 40s and absolutely gorgeous. Like, will beat out most modern women in their 20s today because just simply for how they take care of themselves. And so that's in terms in the looks department, right? So I mean, I joke around about the age thing just because I have a younger girlfriend, but really there's a lot of women out there who are in their 30s and 40s who are very attractive because they take care of themselves. And I would, if there's mental emotional things going on, I'm very expensive. So most women are not going to pay for my one-on-one on a one-off service. My groups and stuff tend to take most of my time, but have them DM me. You know what I mean? And so I can point them in the right direction. But yeah, I have coached women on their issues, relationship related, and with a lot of success actually. Although it's not my primary clientele, right? So, anyways, so preventative. Okay, so that was a good example. Like, why wait until the chick has you're finding mementos from an ex-boyfriend and a bunch of stuff, you know what I mean? And creating that friction point during the dating process as a preventative measure. I mean, I'm going to set that frame. This party setting your frame. I'm going to say, like, hey, this kind of behavior is good for me. This isn't good for me. And she does that too, by the way. I mean, women do that all the time. They'll say, like, what they're in a larger sense, like what they're comfortable with and what they're not before things happen. Most people do this to a small degree, but I think that you guys need to be more aware and to do this to a much larger degree. The reason why, especially besides avoiding conflict, is that ratio, that magic ratio, right, of 5 to 1. You now have a positive interaction with her about a boundary because it hasn't been crossed. You know what I mean? And you guys get that good feeling about that. And that gives her the opportunity, if she is crossing that boundary, or you know what I mean, to remedy that before you get into a conflict. And so that keeps it positive versus waiting for a conflict and now having these negative friction points that erode away and chip away at the relationship. So that's one silver bullet for you, is to use the preventative. Okay. Now you're not going to be able to prevent everything. Conflict's going to happen. So when do you have it? So when the conflict happens, meaning a condition wasn't met, or a boundary was crossed, you got to ask yourself, is this something that I need to address immediately? All right. Or is this something that I can time my response? And that's most of the time, okay, it's a timed response. There's very few things where you have to immediately, set a hard boundary and react. And usually when you're reacting, you're not going to be calibrated. All right. You want to be proactive and not reactive when you respond to these friction points. Okay. And so that's just as best as you can. Now, if you have to have an immediate reaction, I'll tell you how to do that proactively here in a second. But most of you guys get your little anxieties up in a bunch, and girls too, right? And then it's like, I have to get an attitude, you know, act like I'm mad, give them the silent treatment, say something angry, or say a definitive boundary statement right now. Like, and then it sets the tone for, let's say, the rest of an evening or the rest of an interaction as a negative tone. And so now you throw off this magic ratio. And I'll tell you what, as a assertive dominant guy, I am guilty of this 10 times over. Like this is one thing I didn't do a lot in some of my past relationships, you know what I mean? That I do now, okay? Which is think about my timing. So even if your game my it's not like my game was bad, right? It's so even when you're good with women, this is something you know, and you have good communication skills, this is something you can really, you know, screw up, you know what I mean? And so that is not timing something appropriately and being reactive, being overly assertive because you're an assertive person and you don't allow for boundary crossings, but in the wrong time and in the wrong place, and you just create a conflict where there didn't need to be one. You get what I'm saying? And so this is where, you know, it's and this is an interesting comment, you know, game without red pill awareness is a killer. This is true. Also, I would say the red pill awareness, if we're talking about it, and awareness of, we'll say, evolutionary psychology principles, right? Awareness of these principles without game is also a killer. Either one, you have to have game being communication skills with your partner. Okay. And so you have to ask yourself, is it this important for me to bring up right this second? And so let's talk about the immediate. Okay. So this is where there's a reasonable assertiveness. All right. You have to have a reasonable assertiveness and then right now action. Do you know what I mean? Okay. And so this is going to be very few scenarios that would require an immediate reaction. In fact, if you guys have any you would like to give where you think it would require immediate reaction, throw it in the chat. Maybe I'll use it as an example. Otherwise, I'm going to have to try to search in my mind for one. Okay. So yeah, we got some good comments here. I'm gonna throw that one out there. Disarming a conversation by appealing to the good chimp brain is such a powerful setting for discussion. Yes, it is. I think the biggest thing is directing the conversation to avoid a defensive mindset. Yeah, that's very important. You know, not to be attacking to create her and put her in a situation to be defensive and to put her in a situation where she has to defend who she is. In other words, good chimp, right? Yes, that's very valuable, very important. And the timing of this can matter, right? Like again, so let's say she makes a comment about an ex, you know, or whatever when she's, you know, joking around with a friend and it's a comment alluding to him being, I don't know, let's say sexually viable in his life or something like that, like he was. Let's say she just makes this comment, right? About because girls are, you can be, you know, jackasses about these sorts of things. And so she's like, let's say you're hanging out with her and she's hanging out, you know, with a girl, it's a girlfriend, and maybe so there's a few people hanging out, and her friend like references some ex, and she's like laughing and referencing that ex, but it kind of, you know, is doing it in such a way where it's like it's of a sexual nature, but it's not overt. It's not like, oh yeah, like you banged me so good or whatever. But maybe it's like, you know, referencing some sex in some sort of a way where it's just not very comfortable and it's not respectful to you being her current partner. It puts that other guy in like a positive sexual light, and doing that in front of you and doing that, you know, even behind your back while she's with you, then calls to question your sexual power and viability in her life, right? So let's say she does that and it's clearly a boundary cross. I mean, it's a boundary you don't feel comfortable with that, you know. You know, you could do you could blow up on her and say, "Oh yeah, like so why don't you go fuck him then?" You know, or whatever, right? You could just you could be like that, and you could create a scene in front of all the friends, and you could react to that, right? But that wouldn't be the right way to do it. You know what I mean? And so maybe that is if it's just a passing comment and it's over with, your first assessment is, do I need to address this right now in front of everybody and the way that my emotions are telling me to address it, right? Your emotions could be telling you to shit down her neck, and but that's not at all appropriate, you know. Now what she said was inappropriate, but her being inappropriate is not, permission, doesn't grant you permission to also be inappropriate. You see what I mean? And so maybe you need to, say if it's over, like she says the comment in the exchange, and then they're on to the next thing, maybe in your immediate reaction, you need to put this in the memory bank and then bring it up later, not with everybody there. Okay. And this is when a well-timed response is. So you probably need a well-timed response. Okay. So then what do you do in the moment? Well, in the moment, you have to act indifferent to that comment and to what happened. And you have to focus on the positive aspects of the rest of the evening and the night. And you compartmentalize what was said and put it on the back burner. This is very hard to do for you guys, for a lot of you, because you are not as strong in your inner game. Okay. You need to be able to do this, and you can do this when you don't, use your partner as a point of validation for your own, we'll say, self-esteem and self-worth and identity. But most guys and most women use their partner as um that point of validation. And quite frankly, it's actually okay for the woman to use you as that point of validation. All right. But you as a guy, you should not. Only, and I say that because you're the masculine energy in the relationship and you're leading the relationship. All right. And so to any of my newbies that come on here, I'm not going to have a conversation about it with you right now about the difference between masculine and feminine. All right. A lot of our more woke-ish people don't think that exists. So can't have that conversation with you right now, but accept it. There's a masculine energy, and you bring it as the guy. You don't, that means that she cannot be your validation point. All right. She can be someone you care about, that you have all the love feelings for. She can love you. You can be happy when she says all the good things about you, and you could, take that to heart to mean that she's emotionally drawn to you, right, and happy with you. But that's not what makes you the man that you are. Okay. And so you need to be able to separate the two. And when she does something that calls it to question, you need to be able to compartmentalize that and deal with that at the right time if it's not the appropriate time to deal with that. All right. And then be indifferent in the right time that it's indifferent. Because really, let's say she says something validating an ex's sexual whatever with a friend or a partner, and it's not overtly disrespectful or whatever, like where it's degrading to you overtly, well, does she see you as a sexual power in her life? Does she not? Either way, it doesn't make you less or more. How you handle it does, right? So you got to ask yourself, is this something I need to handle? Now, let's say this continues the discussions continue to happen, and she's talking, and now we're crossing into lines of disrespect because she's not overtly just being like, oh yeah, this guy had a bigger dong than Bill over here, ha ha ha, and he made me come more than this guy, like it's not like overt like that, right? But let's say just she keeps going down memory lane of all the dudes she's banged, or this situation with this guy, and with her friend, with you standing right there and other people around, you probably need to say something now. Now you do need an immediate response, and you're now in public, and it might be embarrassing to both her and you. But here's the thing, you have to assert a boundary, right? And so, that's where boundary enforcement has to happen. And if she gets to be embarrassed and look like an idiot and a bad chimp, that's her consequence, right? For crossing a boundary in the manner in which she's doing it. And she's giving you not much of a response. And guaranteed, if you do this, if you have an immediate response that's appropriate and calibrated, it will embarrass her. She may be mad at you for a few days, but she probably won't do that again, right? And so that's where you might need to say, hey, look, I don't really want to go down memory lane of guys that you've banged in the past while we're sitting here in front of a bunch of people. All right, I'm not really cool with that. So I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to come back, and then hopefully that conversation is going to be different. and then you get up and you go. You use the bathroom, you come back. She might be mad at you, okay, and whatever, or she might be uncomfortable, but then you go right back to normal. All right, you go and we'll deal with this later. If she wants to continue to escalate a conflict in public, then you can just say, listen, I'm not going to do this in public with you. You're just crossing a boundary and it's not okay. We can leave, or I can leave, and you can get a ride home. But, I'm not going to keep doing this. Right. So these are boundary enforcement things. Right. So when it's immediate response, especially a public one, they usually can be knocking microphones over. That's what it does. Usually can be like, it can escalate very quickly. You de-escalate as best as you can by being the reasonable force in that. But this is where you're not yelling, you're not, but you can be assertive, right? And you need to do that. Okay. And so that's something that you need to you need to do that appropriately. But obviously this is going to create a massively negative experience, which will take a lot of positives to counteract it. And yes, it may be her fault, okay, by crossing those boundaries, but you're in the relationship. It's not about whose fault it is. So this is something that will probably create this negative experience, and then there'll be further conflict afterwards or whatever, depending on how good she is at handling conflict. Right? It's going to create some discomfort. It's going to create, not a good appearance in front of everybody else, which does matter in your relationship, especially to her. And so these are things that could need to be reserved, especially if it's something in public like that, right? Let's say now another example. But again, you can't allow a boundary to just continue to be crossed though, and you to accept it, because then that becomes a new boundary. So you can't accept the boundary cross, but there's see how there's a calibration here. She doesn't say one comment and then I just come down on her like a hammer in front of everybody. Maybe she says this one thing and it passes, and then I just let it go and we talk later, right? And then, or maybe that one thing that she said was really not as big of a deal as it sounded to me. And as I had time to think about it, I think, you know what? I'm seeing I don't need to bring this up at all. And it's a non-issue. You see what I mean? So time can give you the space to rationally process the stuff. So you're not just reacting emotionally. All right. And that's what's important. But of course, a continued, like if it's in the moment and it's a serious boundary cross or whatever, you have to do it right away. Keep them. That's going to be a consequence, right? So your steps for immediate is you take a deep breath. All right. And there's a way of breathing to calm yourself down. Make sure you're in a calm state and give yourself a tactical pause. All right. But that's pronounced. I won't do it in a way that people notice it. All right. A double inhale and an exhale, maybe two of those. And I take a pause and I just sort of think. And what am I thinking about? I'm asking myself, is this something I need to respond to right now? Or is this something that I can wait on? So when you have that emotional reaction in the immediate, you tactically pause and you assess. Unless somebody is getting shot or murdered or kidnapped or something, you know what I mean? You don't need an immediate reaction that's going to get you in trouble or bring unnecessary negative conflict to your relationship. They're going to have to try to counteract later. All right. Some of you guys lack emotional self-control. I have been in different times of my life. I've been more of an immediate reactor because that's part of just being sort of a little bit too domineering sometimes. And, that's something where, you need to get more calibrated and better at that pause. So you want to train yourself mentally, all right, and emotionally to pause and then assess. And then if you have to have an immediate reaction, you're going to, in an emotionally controlled way, state the boundary that was crossed and say, we need to stop this, or consequence. right? Or this needs to stop. And that's the action plan. All right. So there is no listen, understand. There's no Luca for those of you guys are tracking that. And I'll talk to that about that more as the series goes on. It's really just a boundary statement and then possible statement of a consequence or just an implied consequence. So if I say, for example, hey, I don't want to go down memory lane for all the dudes you used to bang or some guy you used to hook up with, not in front of her. It's just disrespectful to me. So I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to come back and then let's be talking about something else. And then boom, boom, right? She gets embarrassed or whatever. Too bad. She should be embarrassed. It was stupid, right? But but then you go back to normal, okay? And you get a hold of your emotions, all right? It doesn't do you any good to continue to hang on to that stuff. What that does is it sends a message that that what she was talking about is more of a threat, you know what I mean, than it should be. All right. And that's not even good from a game perspective. So yeah, so that's how you handle that kind of stuff. Is you state a boundary. Now, I didn't say, if she were to continue to create a conflict over it or continue to cross that boundary, well, then there's going to be consequence. And that consequence is usual removal of your time, attention, energy. Okay, so that's usually what it is you've stated the boundary and she continues, you just remove it. Maybe you just straight up leave. You're her ride home. So what? She has Uber on her phone. All right, if it's that bad, right? Or maybe you say to her girlfriend, "Hey, are you cool to drive her home?" She's like, "Well, yeah, why?" All right, I'm gonna go. I'll see you guys later. And you leave. You see what I mean? Like this is a boundary enforcement at this point. And then we'll get into what happens after, but that's how you handle it immediately. You don't yell, you don't scream, you don't lose control, you don't have a public argument. You see what I mean? You don't pull her in a public argument, which would include pulling her aside and yelling at each other in the corner or outside or in the truck, you're in your vehicle. You know what I'm saying? While everybody else knows you're having this fight. All right. It's just a boundary enforcement. And here's the change of behavior. And then if that doesn't change or if the conflict continues, then it's action, which is usually removal of time or attention. Hey, we can leave or I'm leaving, which is it, And so if she can't have now a reasonable conversation, which we'll get into the conflict management part, then there isn't one until she can't. You see what I mean? But you're just not going to let that boundary continue to be crossed, right? Or that condition continue to be not met. And so that's that. All right. See any questions? Is there any value in it? What is this one? Yeah, so sometimes this is a good one that's relevant to the topic. So do you think there's any value in making a direct comment in the moment that isn't emotional? Like that's a weird thing to say and then move on and continue. It can be, yeah, sure. A statement or a look or something that states that's something you can do, something that states that I don't approve this right now. You know what I mean? And then you see it change and that's fine. That's of course, that's a good point. All right. You can do that. Right. You just kind of look at her or you say that statement like, oh, that's cool or that's weird or whatever, and then she's like, well, and then she backs it up and but then you let it go. The point is if she backs off of the boundary cross and it's not the appropriate time to have an immediate reaction or conversation, then you need to let her back herself out of it. If you give her that look and then she sort of stops talking about it, or if you say, well, that's cute or weird or, oh, that's awesome, or whatever. And it's kind of a whatever. And she's like, no, I didn't mean it like that or this, that, and the other. And then, then you just move back, you know what I mean? And so then you just allow it to go back to normal climate, and so that's something that you can do, sure. But again, it's timing. Is now the time to have a fight? You know what I mean? And so, or not. And the point is, you can't. There's an art to not allowing your boundaries to continue to be crossed in social scenarios or whatever. And here's another one, not just a social scenario, but let's say she says something that doesn't sit right with you. Like she told you something and then she said something that makes it sound like she was lying to you earlier, but you're driving on the way to go do something. All right. is that the time to bring up that discussion so that you have a fight over something that might not be, you know what I mean, or you have this conflict, and so maybe that's not the right time. You know what I mean? And so you know, so that's the things that you need to ask yourself. You know what I mean? And so, well, apparently, modern date guy is gonna kill his girlfriend if she does that. So I guess that's an option too. Modern date guy. Thank you very much. You could kill your girlfriend, and if she crosses those boundaries. All right. Anyway, so let's get into now a well-timed response. All right. So, and again, like, so most of these things are going to be preventative or a well-timed response. And this is where, okay, she said something, it doesn't quite fit, your boundaries. You're not, you know what I mean? It's not good, but then it goes away, or something happens, you need to talk about it, right? When do you talk about it? You know what I mean? And when do you bring it up? Let's say she wants to talk about something and it's going to be a friction point. All right. So you want to time it. All right. So you time it to when there's a time where you two have a positive bias. Okay. And so mentally speaking, people can get in a negative bias or a positive bias or a neutral bias. You want to be as neutral in your biases as you can in these types of situations, but you can have a bit of a you definitely it's useful to have a bit of a positive feelings or bias towards your partner, right? If your partner has demonstrated, for example, that she's a good partner up until this point, then you can go on that assumption unless she's demonstrating something different. And so, for example, let's say something she crosses a boundary or he does something that says something or does something you don't like. You can assume that you can go in with the assumption that this person is, not intending to harm you with what they did. You know what I mean? If otherwise, why would you be with them? You know what I mean? If that's how if you assume that the worst of your partner and your partner's a bad partner, then you probably shouldn't be in any commitment with this person. So let's not assume the worst, but the um let's assume a little bit of a positive bias here. Not unreasonably positive, but at least be neutral. If you're thinking all the negative thoughts, it's probably coming from your anxiety, right? Um, and at least look things neutrally first before you make a judgment. But even if you're with her and she has demonstrated a lot of good qualities and this thing seems uncharacteristic, give her the benefit of the doubt, right? You as a man too, like you want the benefit of the doubt, right? If you do something and she's triggered by it, do you want her to assume the worst all the time? I won't have a partner who assumes the worst all the time about me. You know what I mean? You want them to have some level of a positive bias towards you, unless of course you've earned the negative bias. Like if you lied to her a whole lot and you've not recovered from that or demonstrated you know honesty in other situations, well, it's going to take a while to build up trust, right? If she's lied to you or she's done boundary crossings in the same way, it makes sense then that you would have a negative assumption that this conversation is not going to go well or that she intended you, whatever, that all the bad things she's done in the past, she's doing again. It's normal to have that negative assumption, right? However, you cannot have a productive conversation or deal with this friction point if you are in a negative bias. All right. Not really. And so you have to move that. I mean, if you want to continue to have negative exchanges until the relationship eventually ends, then go by all means. Okay. By all means. But if you don't want to do that, you have to, okay, she's done a bunch of things in the past. This looks like that thing. I'm going to at least approach the conversation, give them the benefit of the doubt, gather all of the information, and figure out where we're at before I assume that they did all this, right? Or whatever. We're not talking about like hard proof of, of making a, mistake or doing something wrong, but we're talking just like in a conflict, right? And so you want to move yourself to neutral if you're in negative, and having a positive bias, a little bit of a positive one for your partner until they destroy that or ruin that, in which case you probably need to exit the relationship. If you don't have a positive bias and you're not willing to have a positive bias towards your partner, then you probably don't need to be with that person. You know what I mean? But if you're not willing to do that, and a lot of you guys are not, men and women aren't willing to do that because they're insecure about, you know, being duped or whatever, right? It just, you're afraid. And so fear is going to crush your relationships, and anxiety will crush it, and you will do it. You'll be the person who's at fault, not the other person. So you want to pick a time when a positive bias exists, right? Or at least a neutral, a positive. So when something happens, and if it's a moment, or when she's in a bad mood, or when things are like heated, let's say let's say she's not happy that day because it's just whatever reason, that's not the time now to bring up, right? Or when you're irritated with her, let's say you're irritated with her about something unrelated, something else, that's not the time. Or just a general irritation, let's say you're both in just a shitty mood, right? She's in a bad mood, it's put you in a bad mood, and then you're thinking of that thing that you need to talk about with her. Now is not the time. Oh, well, like she says something, it's bothered, it's just her mood or shittiness is bothering you. And you go, well, how about 2 days ago? And then you bring up whatever it is, right? Wrong time. Okay. Bad timing. So a lot of times what happens is you guys are afraid to bring up friction points when things are going well, because you're afraid that it'll ruin the climate that you're in. And then you'll wait until things are just not feeling quite as good for her or for you. And then that's when you choose to bring it up. The wrong answer. Okay. That's the wrong and the opposite way of how you have to handle it. Because if you bring things up and you're in a negative bias and she is in a negative bias, you're both going to think the worst out of each other and what you guys are saying. And your perceptions and the way you take what they're saying isn't going to go well. And it's going to escalate into more of a conflict. You're going to make a problem bigger because of a negative bias versus solve a problem and make the effects of those problems, right, smaller. All right. So that's what you need to do. So you're going to pick a time, and what I recommend every couple has every day if you're very serious about each other. But if you don't see each other every day, then consistently enough, you need to have quiet time with each other. All right. So what do I mean by quiet time? Time where you're just hanging out and not really doing anything. Okay. Maybe you're, just chilling next to each other in the evenings, or sharing a cup of coffee in the mornings, or having a meal together. You know, this is quiet time. All right. That's a good time to bring up an issue in a way that's open and non-accusatory. All right. So you're not trying to say that the other person is a bad person, and this is why I'm bringing this up. All right. And you want to bring it up in with as much of a positive sort of spin on it, on who they are as possible, and having the gratitude for who they are and the things that are good about them present in your mind when you bring it up, and also have the resolve and the confidence that this is going to be a problem we can solve. As a man, you hold the frame. So if you show up, but this is going to be true for girls too, and not about the frame part, but about how to show up. If you show up and you are thinking that this isn't going to work out because of this conflict, and that we're not going to solve this, and this isn't going to be good, what do you think is going to happen? All right. You're going to convey in your voice and your message that this isn't going to be good. We're going to have a fight. This is going to be a conflict, right? We're not going to solve this problem. And then that sends the message to your partner, who is a social animal and has all of those emotional sensors to sense your state of being, that we're not going to solve this problem. So even if you come about it as reasonably as possible, her confidence is not going to be there in solving it. And that's where defensive behaviors and a lot of problems will happen. All right. If you can approach it from, I think we can solve this and it's going to be okay, but here's the issue, and a climate of you're not a bad person, but this is not a good thing and we can't do this, right? And then that's going to be a way to solve it. All right. And doing it in a place where you are, chilled out, the energy is calm, serotonin is high, right? Is the best time to bring it up. And so when you bring up a conflict and how you bring it up is going to dictate how this conflict gets solved. If you bring it up because you're in an emotionally erratic state and you sound like you're attacking your partner, you're going to run through the normal cycle of an argument, which is going to be detrimental to your relationships. All right. If you know how to bring up and time a conflict properly, that'll give you the time to process some of your emotions. Think about what you're going to say. Think about if anything needs to be brought up at all, right? Or perhaps just dealing with actions or whatever, or not even, maybe it's just you perceived it a certain way, but it's not worth, having a big blow up over it. And so whatever it may be, right? Like, but you gives you that time and space, and then it creates an emotional climate where you approach the discussion with an emotional climate between the two of you of gratitude, appreciation for each other, and a willingness to solve a problem. All right. Now, in terms of choosing a woman or a man, and if you're a chick, you want to choose somebody who's capable of having these discussions. All right. If there's somebody who is going to divulge into negative and toxic behaviors all the time, then you need to ask yourself, is this somebody that you really need to be in a relationship with? All right. And then preferably before you have a defined commitment and before you go all in, so to speak, you've had some conflicts or in some things, even if they're just minor ones, or you can see how this person handles that stress and how this person handles, when there's opposing views in these conflicts. That's going to let you know whether or not this person is going to be a good partner or not. Now, this is one of those things where a lot of those red flag lists and stuff, what that points to. Let's look at the issue of, let's say, short-term relationships and notches, right? So if particularly a woman has had a lot of short-term relationships and notches, she's not practiced these skills. You know what I mean? She's practiced discarding a relationship. Same with the guy in this case. When it comes to this is probably universally true. So how patient is that person going to be with managing conflict? It doesn't mean that they're not going to be patient. I mean, maybe they've learned those skills in long term. Maybe they've been in relationships to learn those skills, or maybe they've been consciously aware, because your awareness matters, and they've worked on this, but without having, thought about it, the tendency for someone who's been in a lot of short-term encounters is to bounce the minute that conflict happens. And if the conflict happens and that they want to stay in the relationship, they might have very poor conflict management skills. And then they're not going to want to, have a discussion with you with a mental and emotional climate of gratitude and appreciation for you and a focus on solving a problem, right? What if they grew up with a parent that was very domineering and discarded her relationships or his relationships, right? And divorced families, and let's say families where conflict was addressed in the family with aggression and dominance and power versus problem solving and appreciation and gratitude. What do you think is going to happen with that person? Are they going to handle the conflict well? Probably not. Are they going to approach these conflicts with a mental and emotional climate of gratitude and appreciation for you and problem solving as the focus? Probably not. Right. And so this is something that they may not have right off the bat. And if they can't get this and are unwilling to do this, then they are not going to be a good relationship partner for you. Okay. Um, let's say, well, I'll continue for a little bit and we'll talk about, because it's down to timing again, of the phases of an argument. Now, when I get off of this live thing, I'll actually put it in the chat. I did videos from Afghanistan years ago on handling an argument. Okay. These are very good. A lot of people really enjoyed those videos. They really helped them. It's part one, part two. And it's considered in conjunction with this video here. All right. And part one of this series. But in that series, I talk about the phases of an argument. I talk about the four phases, and the four phases are the attack defend phase, where two people are attacking and the other person and defending each other. So when something goes from a friction point into a actual argument, all right, this is the phases. Now there's a saying of don't argue with a woman. I agree with that statement. Okay. And I'll talk about how that applies to these phases here. But if you are in the argument and you don't listen to that, and saying don't argue with a woman is real cute to say on the internet, but then these guys who say that have no idea what conflict management action to do otherwise. So they're just saying things to sound cool and to jerk themselves off. And then, of course, they don't actually know what to do. So um, that's not what I'm going to do with you here. All right. But if it divulges into an argument, what happens is you have an attack and a defend mode that you're in. That's phase one. Nobody's willing to concede. Everybody's trying to win. Okay. So nobody's coming to a discussion with a climate of gratitude and appreciation for a partner and being problem solving focused. What they're coming to this discussion is high emotions and trying to win. All right. And so you have two people trying to win in an argument and they're willing to attack each other any which way in order to make that happen. And this is how things get said that you don't mean. This is how, you really create that imbalance in that magic ratio. You really throw off that negative to positive balance, that 1-to-5 ratio or 5-to-1 if it's negative to positive, or negative about 1-to-5, right? One negative for every 5 of equal intensity. You really throw that off because in attack defend mode, it's negative, boom, coming back and forth, right? It's a lot of negative interaction. And so these can be destructive to your relationship. And as a man, you don't win here. You're approaching this to win, but neither a man or a woman wins this one. If she wins and gets her way, she's effectively devalued her partner in the process, whether she realizes it or not. And that affects how she sees her partner. Right. So now she's essentially brainwashing herself to be less attracted to what may be the best guy that she could be with. Right. Or she's been in a relationship. So she's obviously decided that this is the guy for her, but she's changing her own mind through erratic emotions just by attacking the guy during this phase. Right. And then you do the same as a man. Right. Of course. And so, or as a man, what'll happen is you'll lose the argument because you let her attack the shit out of you and she's devalued you. And now you're making amends and trying to make things better and simping for her, doing whatever. And it's like, it's highly unattractive and it doesn't bring you closer to your partner. And most of the time doesn't even solve the problem. Right. And so it just puts her in a position of power that's been achieved in a toxic manner and really can throw off the dynamic of your relationship. It devalues you. The whole point of handling a conflict properly is so you don't devalue your partner. You could see a person, any human being, you could see them as a piece of crap and you could look at every fault and flaw they have and add that up in your head and decide that they're not worth anything. Or you can see them as the most amazing person in the world. Now, sure, certainly certain people have a lot more negative qualities than positive. And so that makes it hard to see them as a good person. Right. I get that. But most people aren't that, black and white, evil or good, right? Most people have positive and negative traits. And if you've decided you want to be with this person, you saw them with these positive traits. There's nothing wrong with reminding yourself of those positive traits when you're solving a problem. But people do this because they're afraid of losing power, and they end up in an argument, and which ends up making everybody lose. All right. Because even if she wins, she loses because she just devalues her partner and has bad feelings towards them. I don't think that's the goal. Right. And then as far as the guy's concerned, you either let her have these bad feelings about you, or you actually win the argument, in which case now she's resentful and angry at you, even if she's wrong. So there's a lot of times, and how many of you guys experience this, where she does something wrong, you let her know it's an argument, she's wrong. She admits to being wrong, but she's unpleasant and unhappy for multiple days. And she doesn't, because she's mad and upset, right? She's having negative thoughts and feelings towards you, even though she's the one who did the wrong thing. So who's winning there? Nobody. All right. So attack defend mode is when the emotions are high, people's anxieties are up. You're using parts of your brain now that are in emergency situations, and things, more fight or flight parts of the brain are getting involved. Stress hormones are getting involved, and you're trying to beat the other person to get control. All right. That's phase one of an argument. All right. Phase two is it's called effective repair. You're starting to try to repair things, though it's not, like you're not quite in a healthy place yet, but you're not attacking the other person. At least in effective repair, when a person's in that phase, and this is all in their head and how they're showing up, when a person is there, they are not trying to devalue and cut down this person just to win, but they do think they're right, and they do want the other person to give up their power in this, and they do want to hear, what I mean, that they to concede. They want to hear the other person concede in an effective repair phase. All right, and so it's not a healthy place to be still, because it's not what gratitude and appreciation for your partner, as well as, problem solving focused, right? You're not gratitude and problem solving focused when you're in effective repair mode, or when she's in effective repair mode. She just wants to hear you concede. Okay. Now, from the woman's perspective, why does she want that concession? She wants to know she's a good chimp. Okay. And she wants you to know that, she wants you're the dominant force in the relationship. Whether you actually are or not, it's another story. But on an instinctual level, she's responding in these situations as if you are. And if you concede that power, either then that places her in the position to take over and get her needs met, or by conceding, you're saying, okay, you're right, so therefore I'll meet your needs. So she's wanting to get her needs met through your, and your concession says that you'll meet her needs, or that she'll meet her own needs. And your concession also states that, that she's the good chimp and you're the bad chimp. So that's why women want that, right? It's not good for them to have that, though, in that manner. It's not good for them to have that, because all it does is devalue you. So not a good answer, right? But that's what they think that they want. Their instinctual mammalian brain wants this. They're still operating more on a mammalian side of it when they're in phase two. They're maybe not attacking you and trying to cut you down to win, but they still want this concession. And if you give her that in this phase, you effectively devalue yourself, even if you're the person who's wrong. You see what I mean? It's not a good or healthy thing. It's not about right and wrong at this point. And so not necessarily good. Now, you as a guy, you want her to concede when you're in phase two as well, but you want her to do that so that she corrects her behavior, and so that she abides into your action plan for success, because you're usually success and results focused, and she's, you want to be the useful chimp, right? So, and you want her to see you as not useless or bad or wrong. It's not bad chimp for you, but it's more like useless or not, not able to solve the problem the right way. So you want her to see you a different way. She wants you to see her a different way, and that's why she wants to see this concession in this phase, but it's unhealthy. All right. And so it might make her feel better in the moment in terms of calming the anxiety, but her perceptions of you are gonna be wrong, are bad. Okay. And so not a good thing. All right. We'll go to some comments here and then we'll get into the next two, and then we'll probably have to end this video here. I feel like there's a trend in the red pill community that's like a no tolerance. Yeah, it's because they have no game. No tolerance policies are for people with no game. People need I mean, I don't want to say it like that. I mean, obviously there's no tolerance for certain things, but they take no tolerance to this extreme level. You know what I mean? Because they have no game. They're not banging women. They suck at, they're not doing well. All right. If they are even, they're not with women who are healthy to begin with. All right. Or hot or any of that stuff. And this no tolerance is crap. It's obvious no tolerance for something, let's say, like cheating. Like if she bangs another dude, having a no tolerance policy for that, yeah, that makes sense. But like, oh, if she looks at me sideways, I'm gonna tell her to go, blah blah blah, because I'm super alpha. I'm a sigma male. All right, it's all internet posturing from losers and guys who are content creators. Internet posture all the time, and trust me, they don't fuck. All right, it's just the way it is. They don't. And that's where that comes from. It's all out bullshit. All right. So people need programming in general, whether it's a new employee. Yes, exactly. 100%. Yeah, exactly. I mean, they need to be able to be, reprogram, whether they do it, you do it, whatever, to seeing things in a proper and healthy way when they're not seeing things the right way. So let's see here. What else do we got? I have videos that address this. Yes, I'm not going to dig them out now, though, but you can go look them up, and maybe we'll talk about it. That's interesting. I do have videos. I can't, that's the one that I'll have to. But yeah, how to address next. I'm not going to get into that here because I'll just go on a tangent again. We're already almost 2 hours in this video. So attack defend mode's not good. What happens is emotions are high. There's attacking, defending. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Now, either during the conversation or later on, there's less attacking. The emotions aren't as high, but you're still wrong. And, they shouldn't have done this to me and this and that and the other. So what you'll hear, at least from the girl, and sometimes the guy too, depending, is you'll hear a lot of, here's the wrong that you did to me. And this is not, she's wanting to be heard, like blah, 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 because she wants you to concede. Okay. Now it goes into phase 3 as the emotions come down a bit more too, and the ego becomes a little less invested. And now it's in what I call a collaborative mode. A discussion can start in collaborative mode. A discussion really doesn't start until the emotions get to collaborative mode. 1 and 2 phase of an argument, she's too far into a negative bias against you based on what happened to have any productive discussion. All right. So by phase 3, now the negative bias is not quite as strong, or she's a bit more neutral than negative, in the sense of she's open to listening to your side of it. She's open to maybe the idea that she's not perfect here either. Right. And that, okay, like I'm open to she's not fully in problem solving mode yet, but she has more gratitude and appreciation for you, at least in this point, to where the negative bias isn't so strong, and she can at least, you know what I mean, be open to challenging her original thesis, right? Which is that you've done all of the wrong and that she's all of the right, or any wrong that she did was because of you somehow. All right. And I'm using the she and the he here, but this is really happens a lot. The guys can do this differently too, but we're getting more into male and female ways of handling now conflict, and it's not universally the same. So whatever, just stick with me. All right. So the collaborative mode is when a discussion can happen. Start, not end, but start. All right. And then admittance is the fourth mode. That's where that she is okay. She is no longer in a negative bias. She is in a neutral to positive bias. All right. And maybe a neutral bias about whatever the friction point is or whatever the argument's over. And maybe positive just about you in general. And that's a good place to be. Neutral about the friction point, but positive about your partner is the right mindset to solve a problem. And so now she has, provided you didn't pick some, you know, a hole to be with, she has gratitude for you, appreciation for you, and appreciation for the relationship you guys have, as well as a focus on solving a problem. So her focus is on getting her needs met and problem solving, not attacking you, not so much on, she's not worried about being a good chimp versus a bad chimp anymore. She's not worried about getting you to concede so that she can feel better about herself and her needs getting met to calm her anxiety. Her anxiety is calmed enough now where we can solve a problem. Okay. And so this is, and as a guy, you will go through the same phases. You may show up differently with how you communicate it, but it's the same thing. All right. It transfers. It's 4 phases of transferring from I'm right, you're wrong to being right or wrong doesn't matter. It does not about that. It's about the solutions. Here's the action plan. Okay. Now, when she brings up when she has the problem, she might be not, if she's, a healthy communicator with healthy attachments and she's been working on herself on this, she may come to the discussion at a phase 3 or 4, meaning she's calmed down enough. She's not going to do toxic arguing patterns to attack you, right? She's not just demanding your concession without any discussion. She's probably thinks she's right or she wouldn't bring it up, but she's open to the idea. And she's really would rather be focused on solutions to problems, Now, if she's healthy and she comes to you like this, how you handle this will be the difference between pushing her into attack defend or pushing forward into solving the problem and maintaining frame and not being devalued. All right. Now, if she comes to the discussion and she's attack defend, or in the effective repair, but really she's either demanding your concession or she's outright attacking you and blowing up on you and all this stuff, you can't have a healthy discussion there. Okay. And this is where you have to say, hey, look, we can't have a discussion right now because emotions are too high. All right. There's a lot of attacking going on. I don't want to get into attacking you. Let's just take 10 minutes. Let's take a day. Let's take a few days, whatever. And that's what you do effectively, the soft next. So if she cannot come to a conversation in collaborative mode, at least, or preferably in admittance mode, which is, hey, let's solve the problem. And I'm willing to admit my role into why the problem exists, then, you need to soft next until she processes through those emotions and gets to that point. Now, a lot of you guys don't soft next properly. You do it like stonewalling from bad advice in books and on the internet. And so I'm going to advise against that. All right. Stonewalling isn't just removing your communication to manipulate the other person, though that's what it is. And that's not what you want to do. A soft next is not stonewalling. A soft next is where there's an understood reason why you guys are taking this break in communication. And so, she understands, I can't have this conversation with him unless I'm going to abide by the boundaries and that we have and the conditions of having a healthy conversation. See, You're simply setting the boundaries and conditions for productive and happy conversation with somebody that you care about. That's all that is. And you're not allowing her to have this discussion with you without maintaining those boundaries and conditions. In other words, there is no toxic arguing patterns and attacking and then being defensive. There is no crazy erratic emotions. She can have emotions and she can express them, but it's not about attacking you as a person. And if she can't feel that way, if her emotional control isn't there, then she needs to take a break from you until she can. All right. And vice versa, too. Okay. So that's how you manage the state in the climate that you're going to be in when you have a problem solving discussion. That's how you handle a conflict is you manage that state, right? Your own state as well as giving her the opportunity to manage hers and setting her up for success, right? And so when you go to bring something up or she brings something up and she's super pissed and it's this fight and you just bitching back and forth, you got to put yourself in a calm state and say, hey, look, I'm not gonna have you talk to me like that. All right, it's not respectful. You're upset, and you're gonna upset me, or we're both upset. Let's take a minute. We're gonna take some time because we're not doing this with you like this. If she's going to demand and demand and demand more conversation in a toxic fashion, you know what I mean? That soft next may become a hard next, which means like when you're not together, like what is she gonna do? Force you to stay? This is where things get into abuse, right? You're forcing someone to stay in a room with you, or or she blocks the door, or you block the door from her. Like you can't do these physically aggressive things. You have to have emotional and mental self-control enough and enough care and gratitude for your partner not to be this toxic person. Some of you guys, your relationships are just toxic and this is what you're used to, and the women you hook up with are toxic, and you know, this is what you tolerate. You know what I mean? And this is what's normal for you. Thanks, brother. And John MLD in the house. I'm number one. Hell yeah. Anyway, but at any rate, though, you know what I'm saying? That's not what you put up with. And so you got to get used to better in your mind, at least. You got to recognize that you deserve better and you want better. So you have to show up better and you have to enforce your boundaries and conditions to for her to show up better, not to show up and be this toxic force and to do attacking and defensive behavior and to list out demands and to make threats and to try to have power over the other person. All right. And so we're gonna kind of stop my notes anyways here, and we'll wait for a part three where we'll conclude this. But notice how a lot of time has been spent on a couple of things. We haven't even gotten into the brass tacks of how to handle that discussion yet. Why is that though? Because I'm long winded. Okay, I get that. But besides that, why is that? The reason why is because I can tell you the steps of Luca. Some of you might already know that. I can tell you the steps of, the magic ratio. I can tell you, some of these different things, what to say, what to do when, she says or does A, B, C, and you guys will not do it properly. You will completely fuck it up. All right. The reason why, because you won't have empathy for the girl you're talking to. You won't know how to recognize what she's thinking and feeling to begin with, and you won't be able to time these discussions properly. Like, look, I can give you the steps of handling the actual discussion, which we are going to cover in part three, but without timing it properly, what's going to happen? She's going to be in attack defend mode and in a negative bias. And she's in a bad mood to begin with, so it's a negative bias, and then she jumps right into attack defend mode because she's tired or fatigued or anxiety's up, and now you're in a fight instead of a discussion. Doesn't matter if you properly do Luca and action planning. Luca's an acronym for listen, understand, clarity, action. Doesn't matter if you do the right steps that I'm going to cover next time. because you didn't time it right. Right. And so timing is everything. Or you don't, here's another one, is that you don't enforce a boundary. Like she's literally hitting on a guy and dancing on a guy in a bar or something like that. And you're just sitting there going, we'll talk about this later, instead of enforcing the damn boundary. Right. You can't, instead of saying, hey, I don't know what you think is you're doing, but it looks like you have somebody else to go home with, and I'll see you later. Because I'm not doing this. We're effectively broken up, or in that case, maybe, right? Or hey, maybe she's being flirty to somebody, and you put but in a way that's disrespectful or inappropriate. You say, hey, like, I don't know what this is, but I'm not comfortable with it, and I'm going to leave. And you do an immediate reaction because you need to enforce that boundary. Or she gets really, shitty with you. Do you know what I mean? And you look at her like, wow, I'm not going to accept that tone and that reaction, especially in front of everybody. You need to enforce immediate boundary, but you don't. You try to wait it out because you don't want a conflict. That would be bad too, wouldn't it? And so awareness and self-awareness, and not being reactive and proactive, and knowing when the proper time is important. Only do immediate reactions when they're absolutely necessary. And if your girl is not a toxic force in your life, they should rarely, if ever, be necessary. If you find yourself having to have immediate reactions all the time to your girl, she's probably not a good chick for a relationship. You know what I mean? That means she's constantly breaking boundaries and conditions in such a way that it creates like a crisis, and you have to bring it up all the time. Either you are hypersensitive and have no emotional self-control, or I'll say you lack it, or she's not a good partner for you. So that's something to think about. But if those immediate things should be very few and far between, very rare, we're talking once in a new dating scenario, it might happen once in 3 months, maybe twice. If you're together for longer than 6 months, we shouldn't be able to count on one hand. It should be once, maybe twice in 6 months, tops. I mean, that's what I mean by rare, like super rare. If it's happening every week, something is wrong, and it's you or her or both, probably both, right? Now, you can do things in the right time, and waiting for that right climate and timing it properly. Nothing's going to work if she is not coming to the discussion with the right mental and emotional state. And that has to do with your timing, and then how you frame the discussion when you decide to have that conversation, which we'll get into in part 3. All right. So think about that magic ratio, keeping more positive interactions than negative ones in your relationships. And we'll talk more next time. Thanks again.